Right. NHS privatisation. It's happening by stealth. You might still be able to access NHS care free at point of use, but given it is costing us more and more to fund, yet the service is getting worse and worse, just as everything else ever privatised always has, the symptoms should be very recognisable, as much as political denials are almost guaranteed to be found out as being lies. A service here, a treatment delivery option there, the NHS logo still being present, but it's not really the NHS anymore in action. And where private health companies enter the health service, profits have to be made. Where the NHS previously sunk everything back into the service, when profit becomes the target, the service at point of delivery, when it is publicly funded, gets put in a position where it ends up being designed to fail. Underfund, then say private companies are the answer, despite them already being there and the government claiming things like record funding when they're really just lining privatised services, private companies, with that public cash. It's not all going to the actual NHS. Some of it's going to private companies just wearing that NHS logo. To this end, Every Doctor UK, you may not have heard of them, you might have, who don't always convey this message hard enough, actually, in my opinion, have produced what is a rather good, actually, little interactive map showing where services have been privatised near you, all taken from the NHS England provider directory and the websites of those providers. They've gone further, though, because not only have they pinpointed all the locations where non-NHS providers are providing NHS-funded healthcare, that is, private companies taking public money meant for the NHS, but going to them instead. But they've also pinpointed the constituencies of MPs who have taken private healthcare donations. And this is what has given this map, this tool, and Every Doctor UK a fair bit of media coverage this week, because one such MP has been very unhappy about being named and shamed like this. In other words, they know they're total shitbags for taking private healthcare cash, but are more upset about being called out for it than actually having taken the money. Now, we know the NHS is not and never has been safe in Tory hands. None of us would be surprised at Tories taking private healthcare cash, and none of us really would expect any of them to be particularly ashamed about doing so either, because being pro-privatisation of healthcare doesn't damage the average Tory's electoral chances. If people voted sufficiently with the NHS in mind, it wouldn't be in the state it's in. People wouldn't vote Tory, they'd never be in power. Therefore, the NHS isn't an issue deciding their vote. However, it's a bit different when it's Labour, isn't it? Labour are the party that created the NHS. It's supposed to be safe and looked after in Labour's hands. But, of course, Every Doctor have called a few of them out too for being on the take from the private health industry. And it's notable who they are, because it then shows that under Starmer, the NHS is no more safe than under the actual Tories. And that would be something you can imagine they wouldn't want made very public, and some of them might just complain a little bit about. The complaint itself is well worth covering, actually, or the reference to it, because although Every Doctor UK director, Dr. Julia Patterson, doesn't name the individual, it's probably going to be Labour. You can kind of gather it from what she said, based on the reasoning I've just gone over. Every Doctor got contacted by the office of the MP in question, because the MP was unhappy about the inclusion of the donation they received appearing on the interactive map and on their website. Well, for one, they shouldn't have taken the money if they're ashamed of it. And for two, it's in your register of interest, which is publicly available information. So, frankly, tough. They tried to insinuate that their inclusion demonstrated a personal dislike that team has for this particular politician, which, given the map shows several dozen MPs, is a little bit rich and a fair bit of a stretch. You would assume they are involved in health in a professional capacity, though. They even went so far as to say Every Doctor should be more partisan towards them and their party by removing details of the donation. Clearly, they really don't want attention drawn to it. But this really does make you think we're talking about a Labour MP even more now, doesn't it? Having done their homework and verified information of this donation, which, as I've said, isn't hard, anyone can do it, it's publicly available, they're sticking by their guns, and it remains on the Every Doctor UK map, and so it should. Well done to them for doing so. So, assuming it's Labour, how many Labour MPs appear on the map? Not very many, actually, it has to be said. Just 6, in fact. But who they are and the positions they hold in the matter as far as health and the NHS is concerned, it does make them relevant. First and foremost on the list of all these 6 Labour MPs is Keir Starmer himself, Labour's current actual leader, who took £12,500 from John Armitage, the co-founder and chief investment officer of Edgerton Capital, a hedge fund managing some $16 billion of investments, of which just over $500 million is invested in United Health, a US private healthcare company desperate to make inroads into the UK health market and lobbies US politicians incessantly. He's also given the Tories more than £3 million in donations previously. United Health's previous CEO was a chap called Simon Stevens. You might recognise the name. The Tories put him in charge of the NHS to ram through their reforms, which of course was just code for their privatisations. What United Health have done in the US was to break up the healthcare system there into associated care organizations, or ACOs, which later got renamed as integrated care systems, or ICSs. Now, that's another term you might start to recognize, because this is what's happened here now too. The NHS has been broken up into several regional ICSs, making care a postcode lottery now for whatever services we can loosely claim to be still functional. It's an Americanization of our health service here, already beginning. All this was started, it should be noted, not by the Tories, but by Tony Blair. This ICS system stems from United Health working with him and the blue Labour lot of that time. And of course, it is a continuity of that Starmer wants to preside over. So little surprise about this donation ultimately, but it should be setting alarm bells ringing for anyone not stupidly rich and who needs the NHS because they can't afford private healthcare. Starmer himself is taking their money. So any government he leads cannot be seen to be one that will protect the NHS. But if you need further proof of how bad his party and his regime might be regarding our health service, then let me continue. Because next on the map, we have Wes Streeting, Labour's shadow health secretary. Yeah, well, do colour be surprised. Streeting again has taken money also from John Armitage, just like Keir Starmer. But he's taken even more, £15,000. But that's not all. He's also taken £7,500 from a chap called Trevor Chin, a long-time donor to the right-wing Labour MPs. He's also decidedly pro-Israel and fond of funding Labour Friends of Israel Labour members, again, such as Streeting. But from a private health perspective, Chin is a senior advisor to CVC Partners, a tech company which invests heavily in private health and pharmaceutical industries. And if I was a betting man, I reckon this is who got in touch with every doctor. But that's just because, to me, he comes across as one of the most deeply unpleasant politicians going. And indeed, he is the popular choice amongst commenters on Julia Patterson's Twitter thread where she told her story. Sticking with Starmer's health department, also appearing on the map is Streeting's number 2 and still a practicing NHS doctor herself, Dr. Rosina Allin-Khan. She's taken 2 donations of £5,000 apiece from Chris Kilurhy, who works in global health insurance. Lucy Powell is on the list. The shadow digital culture, media and sport MP is on the list. She's taken hospitality worth £500 from DXC Technology, an IT company that sells to private healthcare. Interestingly, she was being interviewed the other day about MPs and whether they should take donations from the gambling lobby. To which she replied, I think the public should judge us by what we do and not judge us by the people who donate to the Labour Party. Well, if you were still being funded by small personal donations, as you were being under Jeremy Corbyn, for example, nobody would question it. But when very wealthy people with vested interests give you money, you have to ask, what are they paying for and what are they buying? They don't give money to anyone without expecting a return. So what are they expecting in return? Would you like to tell us that? You either don't get that or don't care enough that the public generally think such activities stink. Another MP, Jeff Smith, virtually unknown, I had to Google him, is Starmer's shadow minister for sport, tourism, heritage and music, apparently. He also took a £500 hospitality donation from DXC Technology, just like Lucy Powell did. And the last Labour MP featured on the list, as things stand at this moment in time, is Mike Amesbury, shadow minister for local government. He took £1,000 from DXC UK International Holdings, slightly different name, but they are just a subsidiary of the aforementioned DXC Technology. And again, this was a hospitality donation. These are all members of Starmer's leadership team, predominantly with 2 senior members of his health team featured, and of course includes Starmer himself. Private health have no interest in a publicly run, fully nationalised health service. There's no money in it for them. So that isn't what Starmer and co would deliver if they're taking donations. And if it is indeed a Labour MP airing a grievance about this being publicised, that only reinforces that point. The NHS is not safe in the hands of the Tories. It never has been, and it never will be. But it's currently not safe in the hands of Starmer and those of his ilk in the Labour Party either. This is a great piece of work by every doctor. Please do take a look and see what services are affected in your area, certainly as far as England is concerned. There's barely a corner of England not affected by some form of NHS privatisation. It's very much concentrated across England, although it's present in Wales as well, and it's only going to increase with either the Tories or Starmer's Labour in power. That's a certainty, and it's a depressing thought with it. Thanks for watching. If you appreciated this video, please do hit like and subscribe, leave a comment and hit the notification bell too so you don't miss the next one. Also look out for me on social media and other interesting stuff by clicking on the link in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Cheers, folks.